Good morning, makers, and welcome back for another edition of Saturday Morning Craft Along. I'm your host, Agnes, and I am so excited to get my hands dirty today for our craft, where we will be making these adorable little plaster cast candle holders. And I know since the daylight savings has been set in, it's getting a lot darker, a lot earlier. We're seeing less daylight. So it is a nice activity to bring a little light into your evenings and making your living space a little more cozy with some flickering candles. I like to use the electric ones because then I don't have to worry about leaving them unattended. And it's just like such a great little sculptural craft, and I love making sculptures. So I hope you're excited to craft along with us today. And I just want to show you a few different options and just different samples that I've made. So here's the first one I did, and I used some pine needles, like long pine needles, pressed into my clay to get this neat texture. And then I tried another one where I put gemstones inside of it. So there's lots of different ways that you can get creative with your candle holders and create customized looks. And maybe if you're thinking about making it as a gift, think about the person you're making it for and what they would like to have, maybe to fit the decor of their home. And this is my favorite. This is the one I painted. I'll show you guys how to paint yours too. It looks like a little tree stump, so it kind of fits into my woodland themed. I have on my front window a bunch of plants, so it kind of will blend in nicely with the plant display. So I hope you enjoyed this. This is the one we'll be showing you how to make because I think it's just so adorable. And we'll give you all the tips and tricks. So before we get started, I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. Please introduce yourself, your name, and you're going to get entered into our draw at the end of the show, just for saying hi in the chat and participating live with us today. And also, we want to give away a prize for our weekly draw. So we ask that you send us photos of your creations after the broadcast has ended and you've had some time to craft. Please send us your finished project creations, and you're entered into our second draw. So we did our draw this morning, and we're happy to announce that Jenny is our winner for this week. So congratulations. We'll be getting our prize pack out to you. And thinking about this week going forward, we always like to do a little prize that has something to do with our craft next week. So next week we're going to be making some tie-dye. So you might associate tie-dye with summertime, but I'm going to show you how you can do it in your home. Try to contain the mess a little. It's definitely possible to do tie-dye all year round, and we'll be working on some smaller projects. So we'll get you set up with some materials that'll help you out with your tie-dye projects. Excellent. So we're going to switch over to our tabletop view, and we'll show you all the materials that we have prepared for today. So if you have our plaster tile kit, so includes a block of clay, a muslin mat, so it's just a piece of cotton fabric. It's very important for working with clay, and we'll see why once we get started. It also includes these spacer bars. So these are pretty essential into creating the exact thickness that we need. So all they are paint sticks from like the hardware store, and it's 2 layers of them taped together. So you need four painter sticks, and we have our custom rolling pin. It's a piece of PVC pipe. So it's always good to make your own tools. We like to make our own tools at camp. We just have a couple different sizes of popsicle stick. So a large and a small that have been cut. So you have options to use the rounded end and the sort of pointy end with your sculpture making. And this is a fun little tool that we also made. It's a piece of aluminum, so it doesn't rust. It's very important because clay is very wet, and often the tools need to get rinsed and just air dried. So if you were using steel, it would rust on you. We also have, of course, our bag of plaster, which comes with your kit. We're just using molding plaster. Plaster of Paris is fine as well. And we'll be teaching you a proper way to mix it. So we need a measuring cup as well. The cup size we're using is 4 ounces. So yeah, that's the size we're using, and it works out perfectly for the craft that we're doing. I also have a water tub. So anytime you're working with uh, clay and plaster, you need to have a tub of water for washing up. You don't want to go directly to your sink because it's going to clog up your pipes. If you put a lot down, a little bit you'll probably get away with, It's always a good practice to have a tub of water nearby for rinsing your hands and your tools. And at the end, we'll give you some tips about how to dispose of that water. And what else do we have? Of course, we have our templates. So I've gone ahead and created some templates for you. And these are the sizes that you'll need for creating the candle holder. These are just a guideline. It works out really well with the size of clay we have and the amount of plaster we're using. So if you use these templates, things will work out for you. Of course, you're definitely welcome to create your own size of candle holder. If you try to make something a little larger, you might just have to experiment with the quantity of plaster needed. But I've tested these out for you, so you can use those. There's a link in the description. It's also linked on our webpage on the live stream page. You can go ahead, download that, and print it out. And it's got the sizes written down. So another thing we're going to get into a little later is I'm going to show you some painting. So I've grabbed some paint colors I want to use and my palette. And I'm also going to attempt to integrate some more jewels in my sculpture today. So I found this at the dollar store. It came on a roll. It's like a sequin ribbon, and it's not sticky. So if you find jewels that have like the sticky back, they might be harder to work with. I also have these loose jewels that don't have any adhesive. So that's kind of the type that you want to try to use if you're going to use any inclusions. Little glass gemstones work really well too. So yeah, so that's kind of everything I have, and my mixing bucket, which comes in your kit. So that's what we'll be mixing the plaster in. I already have my water measured out. I also have a cookie cutter, and it just happens to be the same size as my template. So I might use the cookie cutter today just for time, but I'll show you how to use the templates as well. Good morning, everyone. Let's see who's here. We have Hillary with Sam. Is Sam watching this morning? Carissa, of course, is in the chat. And Anna is here with Sophie and Julian. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for being with me today. Okay, so this craft is a bit messy. There are ways to contain the mess. I've put down some paper to protect my table. It does get a little dusty. And like I always say when you're working with plaster, if you have the opportunity to do it outside, that's always like the best scenario. But I've been doing this in my basement studio, and I've been just working carefully to contain the dust and the mess. You'll be just fine. So just take your time with it. When you grab your clay out of your bag, you want to start kneading it. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just kind of smacking it and getting it to feel all consistent. So a little bit of this is necessary before you start to roll it out, especially if you have extra moisture. So if you feel like your clay is very sticky, that's what the muslin mat comes in handy for. So you can push the ball you push your clay against the muslin, and it will start to draw out some of that extra moisture. So because it's made of cotton and it's absorbent, and you really want to get your clay to a consistency where it's not sticking to your fingers. So it's always important to kind of keep an eye on how you're storing it. I always like to put a little bit of extra water in the bag to make sure it doesn't dry out. But also being too sticky is a problem as well. So you get to know the consistency of your clay just the more you handle it. And I really love the feel of clay in my hands. I don't know if anybody else has found that. Do you like it? Do you not like it? I really love it, and I don't mind the mess. So I'm kind of patting it down into more of like a pancake shape to get it ready for rolling. I just want it to feel like consistent and kind of work out most of the creases. And then we're going to start to roll it. So I don't recommend rolling out your entire block of clay. What we're using is 500 grams of clay. And to start, just go ahead and cut it in half. I'm using my little aluminum cutter. It's difficult to roll it all in one go, and we really don't need that much to start. So cut it in half. And I'm going to be working on just half of my mat and putting my clay here with my spacer bars with a little bit of room on both sides. And you could put your rolling pin directly on your clay. And mine is like dry enough that it's not sticking. However, if yours is sticking, just go ahead and close up your mat. So fold it over, and this will help with the rolling process. So I will uncover mine just so you can see what's happening. And the nice thing with the mat is it leaves a nice little smooth texture on your clay. So you just kind of roll it back and forth. The spacer bars are going to provide the proper thickness. If you don't have the spacer bars, you might just have to be extra careful to try to get it consistently thick. Now let's go back to our templates and see if we rolled it out wide enough. I feel like I've got it just wide enough for my base. So that's good. I'll go ahead and start cutting it out. Oh, Olivia is here. Welcome, Olivia. Yay. Yes, this one is a little more complicated. So if you need to rewatch the video later, that's totally okay. So put your template down on your clay and you're going to use your like aluminum tool to start cutting it. So here's my tip for cutting circles. Circles can be tricky. You want to just kind of cut it in straight across. So instead of trying to follow around like you would with like a knife, I find it's easiest to just cut big chunks in straight lines and remove them. And then go ahead and cut the corners. Okay, and now, so I'm just trying to reduce the amount of material just by doing straight cuts. And then you can go back and there's still like these little tiny, it's almost like a stop sign right now. So you can go back and just keep cutting the little triangles away until you have something circle-like. And we're going to use our fingers to smooth out the edges. So that's pretty good. All of your extra clay, we're just gonna keep to the side because we might be able to, they might be already big enough to roll out our second template. So for our base, now it's not actually the base of your candle holder. We're doing everything in reverse. So we kind of have to use our brain to think about things in a backwards, upside down kind of a way. We're kind of working inside out. We're creating the mold for this shape. We're creating the negative space for the plaster to be poured into. So whatever indentations and decorations you put on this piece is actually going to show up on the top of your candle holder. Okay, so keep that in mind. And I want to show you how to smooth out the edges. So I'm going to take just my finger in the water tub and just go along the edge, give it a little bit of water, get a little more moisture back in there. And you can use your tools, kind of rub it against, and just use your finger. It's really whatever you prefer. Using something like this that's straight will get you a sharper edge because your finger's round, but the stick is flat. So the stick will do a better job at making the wall kind of straight. So I'm picking up the clay, moving it. It's like just whatever feels good for you. And we don't have to worry about it. Like it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Especially if you're doing the tree trunk. Tree trunks are organic shapes, so it doesn't have to be perfect circle. And so yeah, so that's all there is to it. Just kind of get it ready to be worked. I think next I'm going to work on the indentations before I add any more pieces. So keep in mind anything that you do will be the reverse. So for example, on this, you can see like the lines here, they're actually sticking up. So if I indent the clay, it's going to create like a raised look, which is totally fine. We just want to create some kind of a texture. So you can look around your home for things to press in. So if I wanted to like maybe even try pressing this into the clay to create some texture, that might be pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. I think we're gonna try to make the tree trunk though, so you guys can see the whole process. And so when I did the tree trunk, all I did was I took my my little tool here. You could use like a pencil, that works fine. We just want to make little grooves. And I'm actually going to place this here so you know the keep out area. So I'm just going for like little curvy lines that are going to try to make it look like wood grain. So whatever feels good for you. Just something, right? Just to make it look decorative. You could leave it smooth as well if that's what you prefer. So next we're going to need to create this like a gap, like I'm going to call it a plug. We're going to create a plug that is going to provide the keep out space for like your candle to go in. So because we're working in reverse, we need to create like a little block of clay to place in the middle. So it creates that negative, so that keep out space. The plaster doesn't get filled in. So that's what this template is for. It's called the inside. And I have a perfect amount left over from my first rolling. So I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that and just repeat the process of cutting away all of the corners. I did mention that my cookie cutter was the same size. So you might look into your cookie cutter stash to see if you have one. Of course, anytime you use cookie cutters for crafts, they should probably be dedicated for crafts only, just to keep the food safe. So I have a large collection of cookie cutters that I only use for crafting. But sometimes the materials shouldn't be used again for food once you've used it with materials like clay and whatnot. Okay, so that's how you cut it with template. Looking a little rough around the edges, but we can do the smoothing technique. I won't do it right now. I'm going to cut all three. We need 3 to stack up to make the depth for the candle to fit. Okay. So go ahead and start cutting those out. Does anyone have ideas for the theme of their candle holder that they want to share with us? Are you going to make the tree trunk, or are you just going to kind of just see what happens? Let me know. I'm curious. So that's 2. I like these paper templates because they stick to the clay. So you can make up your own templates, different shapes. It'd be neat to try to make maybe like a star candle holder instead of a circle or a cylinder. Really, this is just the basics. You guys can go crazy with it. And if you have our tile kit, you have enough plaster to make 4, because we're only using 200 grams of plaster and the kit has 800. So lots of materials for you to play with, and of course the clay is totally reusable. Even if you let your clay dry out completely, you can always rehydrate it. That's the nice thing about this material. Okay, so all my extra little bits. It's always a good idea, if you know you're not going to be using it anymore, to grab your bag and keep it in the bag from drying out. I'm working with it pretty quickly, so I'm just going to leave it off to the side for now. Yes, we might have some dirty hands for typing. If you have someone in the room that can type for you, it would be great. It's true. This is a very messy craft. I've got my 3 little circles, and now I want to show you how to get them all to be one piece. I'm going to go over to my water bucket, just get my fingers a little bit wet, add a little bit of water to one, and we're going to stack these up. Give it a pat, a little more water. You want very like small amounts of water. Okay, so now we have this stack up. The water is going to help everything kind of get glued together. And I'm going to be using just the table against the muslin to just kind of smack it. And we're just going to roll it. We want all 3 to kind of become one. Another tip for you guys to try is using the rolling guide as like a paddle for smacking. I find this quite effective. So around all the edges. We just want to get rid of like the grooves. We want it to look like one piece. You can use your fingers. The gap. I really like working with clay. I just kind of glues all time. It's so fun and tactile. I know when you're growing up as a little kid, you probably used a lot of Play-Doh. Might be reminding you of that. This is like grown-up Play-Doh. Okay. I think I've got it looking pretty good. You want it to look as circular as possible, like a nice smooth cylinder. So just take your time to smooth it out because this will affect your final casting. The more time you spend on it, of course, the better it will look. So there you go. Work it until you're happy with how it looks. That's how mine looks. Nice and smooth on all sides. And then we want to plunk it down in the middle. Here we go. What is the diameter? Great question. So it is 1.75 inches. So 1 3/4 inches. So you could even just measure it out. But we have the templates in the description of the video. Okay. And the diameter of the big one is actually the same size as your measuring cup in your kit. So that's kind of, if you don't have it, you could just use your cup to measure. Excellent. So we picked this size because it's just slightly bigger than the size of my candle holder. If you have a specific candle that you want it to make it fit, just use that as your guide, and always make it just slightly bigger so it's not hard for the candle to come in and out. Okay. So to attach it, we're going to add a little bit of water to the base and plunk it down and give it a little push. And that'll help kind of glue it down. There we go. Like a little plug. So we're gonna roll out the wall next. So this is going to be the biggest piece of clay. And so at this point, I recommend you grab your empty clay bag and you're going to put it right on top and move it off to the side. So that way you aren't gonna accidentally bump it. So I'm just gonna move it over to the corner for now. And I'm gonna take the rest of my clay. We're gonna roll all of this out. And we're gonna be rolling it to cut out this template. So we designed the wall of the candle holder to be 2 1/4 inches tall, and it's 10 inches in circumference. We're probably going to be end up trimming that clay to be not quite 10 inches. It's just whatever works out because the clay will stretch as you work it. So it's just a guide. Okay. Thanks, Carissa, for adding those measurements. Awesome. So when you're rolling your clay now for the wall, what you want to do is roll it out into more of like a long sausage shape. So I like to just do this with my hands. You could also roll it against the table if that works for you. I like to just do it in the air. And it's gonna grow as we roll it. So I've got mine about this big, about the length of my hand. Okay, before I start to roll it out. I put it again back down on the mat, 2 spacer bars either side, and we start to roll. So when you're rolling the long piece, kind of want to roll it in like sections so that it rolls out evenly. So just kind of keep moving your rolling pin around and get it to smush out. If it's sticking to your rolling pin like it is with mine, a little bit wet, again, you can do the covering it up technique. And this comes with practice. So if I'm making it look easy, I'm sorry. I've just done a lot of this. I've also actually done a lot of this with cake decorating. So I used to decorate like wedding cakes and used a lot of fondant, which is like an edible kind of a edible dough, really. And it works a lot like Play-Doh. So I'd roll it out, and yeah, it's just like you get used to working with materials. So everything's a learning process. So just keep up the practice, and you'll get really really good at this stuff. Okay. Okay, so I rolled out this. Now I want to check it against my template to see if I have enough. So I don't quite have enough to cover the template. You can see I'm a little short here and I'm a little short here. That's totally fine. This usually happens. I'll show you a way that you can just do a quick little patching thing. So I'll just go ahead and trim the excess from one edge. And I will move this clay over to where I need it. And I'll overlap it a little bit. So because we're going to re-roll this. So I'm just going to add a little extra clay to this side. A little more because I want it to be enough for the template. And then I'm going to add some extra to the bottom. And then we'll just, again, roll it. Kind of blend those scraps back into your slab. If you've got gaps and creases, that's okay. We'll fill those in. Take your template again. See, everything changes when you roll it. It gets smushed and it changes shape. Pretty close here. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'll just trim the extra off now. And we're going to do a final check before we start to do our texture work. So the aluminum tool is the best for trimming. It just works. It's thinner than the wood tools, so this is a great tool to use. A pizza cutter would be great. Like if you have a dedicated pizza cutter, you could do it really quickly. But make sure you only use it for clay work after that. Okay. So I missed a little bit of my corner. That's okay. Just patch it in. And like, if I don't want to see that crease there, just take a tiny bit of your clay and kind of roll it into a tiny little sausage. And we're just going to sort of patch it in and blend it in. And for this, you can use your scraper, your cutting tool. You can use your fingers. We just want it to not have like weird gaps because those will show up in your plaster. So the goal here is to get like a smooth slab. And then we're going to add all of our texture in. Okay. So it doesn't have to be perfect because again, this is just like a guideline and we're probably going to end up trimming it a little bit shorter anyways. So go ahead and take your clay scraps. Should have a tiny bit left over and put it in your bag because we're not going to be using this again until next time we craft. Keep it covered. And now we're ready for the fun part. We get to add some texture. So I'll show you guys how to do the tree trunk, right? And to do that, we're just going to use our little stick, whatever you have, pencil, and we're going to start to add all of the lines that are going to become like the tree bark. So just going to start to draw little lines. And you can push deeper in sections. You can actually use your finger to create like little bumpy indentations, so like more subtle, but it's going to kind of create this organic look in the final shape. Because you don't want it to be like a perfect cylinder. So you can try out different tools and see, like, you know, how you can get different textures in your work. But if you just have this, that's totally fine too. Go crazy until it looks good. One thing I did on this one that I was quite happy with was creating what looks like where a tree branch would have come out of. So to do that, I used like the end of a Sharpie marker. So let's see if I have one down here. I'm gonna grab my marker box and see what I can use in here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna take the end of like a permanent marker, and it's got this nice round base that we can use to press in. I'm gonna give it a wiggle. and it's going to create this little circular indentation. You can even go ahead and like try to make it bigger with your fingers. Go back in and make them look like different sizes. If you do these, just keep them far away from the edges because the edges are going to get trimmed. So you might lose that detail. So we're going to add a few different knots here. A knot in a tree is where a branch was growing or it got cut. There we go. He's good. And you can use, for finer lines, you can use your silver metal tool, do thinner scraping. If you're going around your circles, you might want to have some lines that are curvy. Be pretty loose with this because we're going for organic shapes. Okay. There we go. That's all there is to it. Not too complicated. It's maybe try to give you a little bit of a closer look here. Things turned out. This is going to create some cool texture that when we add the paint, it's really going to make it pop. So if you're doing, I'll show you, actually, if you do want to do some jewels, just how simple it is to add them. I won't leave this in, or maybe I should. Maybe I should leave one jewel in my trunk. Maybe this nice big blue one. I'm going to add this here. So all you do is you press your jewel right in. And it doesn't have to be completely in. It's better if it kind of sticks out just like a tiny bit. Because the plaster is going to like seep in, and it's going to like seep in just underneath. And that's what's going to hold it into the candle holder, and it's going to like be permanently in there. So adding gems is pretty fun. It's not difficult at all. Hi, Sophie. Okay. Now we're going to add it onto our base that we made, okay? So we're going to take a little more water, and we're going to just choose one of the long edges. Whichever one makes sense for you. Run a little bit of water up and down it, and then we'll start to wrap. Okay. So I'm just putting it up against circle, and ooh, looks like it turned out pretty close in size, so that's pretty good. We do want to put some extra pressure along the base. So you're taking your finger, turn it this way so you can see, and you're squishing the edge, okay? You're making good contact with the base so we don't get leaks. We don't want the plaster leaking out of the bottom, okay? So take your time and use your fingers to push. Get a good contact. You can always just look inside and see how it turned out. Now, to join the seam, this is probably like the trickiest part of the whole thing because now everything is like together and it's more likely to bump things. So here's what I'll recommend is you take one side, it's going to be the side that gets attached first, and I'm going to just trim it on an angle. So let's see if I can hold it up a little bit, you guys can see. So if this is the end of my clay, I'm just gonna cut it on like a bit of like a 45-degree angle all the way down. And this is gonna like help make the seam a little nicer. So I'm removing some of that extra clay. And so what I have now is sort of like this angled edge. I hope you guys can see that. Okay. If this is too difficult for you, you don't have to do this step. I just wanted to show you like a little bit of an advanced way to do it. And so now it's ready to accept the other side and to close it up, okay? So again, a little bit of water helps make the join a little tighter or a little more secure. And then you can use your fingers to pinch them together. If you ended up having your piece, like if it stretched a lot, you can trim off extra, or you can just leave it overhanging. Anything on the outside isn't going to matter. It's only what's on the inside. Okay, and it's really important that this seam is well joined. Again, we don't want leaks, okay? So because everything is like, it's hard to get your hands in there now, we're gonna find my little tool and we can use this to press on the seam. I'll hold it this way, you guys can see. So we'll use the popsicle stick and try to smooth out that seam to fill up any gaps, okay? And then again, you can, if you have extra clay, you can always add some to the back of the seam too, just for extra reinforcement. So you could roll a little sausage and you can add it back into the outside of your mold. Just for safety, we really don't want a disaster to happen. Okay. And because I've been like pushing on the inside of my mold, I've lost a little bit of the definition. So I'm gonna go back in and just add a few more of my scrape lines. Now, if you would like your tree trunk to have like a bit of a flare, so you can kind of see on mine, it does flare out just slightly. It has this shape to it. So to do that, all you do is you kind of gently pull on your mold, and that's how you can modify the shape. And you can get really creative with this. If you want, maybe I might try to pinch it to look like like the beginning of the tree root, and it's still sticking out of the ground. I'm just kind of working the clay, my hands. Thank you, Sophie. I'm so excited for you to try this. Kind of, you want it to look organic, so it doesn't need to be symmetrical. Right. Pretty good. Checking on my gemstone here. I kind of want to add more. So this is my last chance to like add stuff. Let's see what we're gonna add in here. I don't know if I have any more blues. Oh, I do. There's a little blue one. So I could go back and like just pop a few more in there. A nice purple heart. Make sure if the heart needs to be upside down when I put it in though. Okay, cool. So we are ready to mix our plaster. So this is the extra messy part. I'm gonna clean up a little bit. You don't want to mix your plaster on top of your muslin mat, just because it is messy and you can avoid getting your mat too dirty. Just put it aside. Work directly on your table covering. I'm gonna grab the plaster, and you probably want to have cleanish hands. So mine are not too bad, but if you have like a lot of clay on them, it's a good idea to give them a wash. So just take your water tub, get them a little bit wet, and we also want to have paper towels handy. So I'm just going to take my wet hands and rub them on the paper towel to get rid of any clay dust that's still there, just so we keep our plaster from getting contaminated. Okay. Awesome. I don't really need to wash them with soap and water at this point. I'll do that at the very end. So I've got my 1 liter plastic tub filled with my 4-ounce cup of water. So I just filled it with regular tap water. Cool is best. Warm is not ideal. So just like, cool or cold. And just go ahead and dump that into your larger mixing container. And then we're ready to mix plaster. So open the bag. And if you're probably going to be using the same mixing cup, so make sure that it's completely dry rub it with a paper towel because we don't want to put a wet cup into our dry plaster. That will be bad. It will make your plaster like start to cure inside the powder. So I like to open up my bag, turn down the edges, open it up. Okay, now I do have like a second cup just for to make sure because I have extra. This is the same size 4-ounce cup that we used for the water. And we're going to take a full scoop of plaster. Okay, like so. And we're going to just start gently start to sift it in. So I'm just going to take one finger and just start to push it into the water. You always start with the water first, add the plaster next. And you might be asking yourself, why am I doing this so slowly? And the reason is we want to give the plaster time to absorb into the water. So if you were to just like put it all in and like just dump it once in 1 second, it wouldn't absorb as nicely, and you'll probably end up with a lot of clumps. So this is like the best way to minimize the clumps in your clay, is just to add it slowly. The whole process should take about 2.5 minutes to give you a sense of time. Okay, so you can kind of see how slowly I've been going. Now we are going to add a second scoop. However, we're probably not going to add the entire second scoop. So the general ratio of water to plaster is like a 1 to 2, like 1 part water to 2 parts plaster. But it's really not a measurement type of thing so it's not like always exact. That's why we do it by eye. And so I'm going to show you some telltale signs to look for as you're mixing your plaster. You can already see a little bit of an island starting to form. And that's kind of what we're going to be looking for as we add our plaster. So go ahead and start sifting in. And by sifting, I just mean like slowly pushing. You don't need a sifter. Just start slowly adding it and paying attention to like adding it to the edges of the water. It's still pretty watery, still absorbing it. But eventually, we're going to start to see these cracked islands start to appear. We don't want to mix it until everything has been added. Okay, we're getting close. So as you start to see these islands appear, ooh, my camera lights are quite bright today. Let me see if I can get a better shot. Okay. Keep adding. Okay, so I'm getting pretty close. Well, you guys can see that better if I put my hand there. You can see the island starting to rest on top, and that's when you know you're close. Okay. And now I notice the edges are quite watery still, so that's where I will focus my adding the plaster just to the edges, because that's where the water is still getting the plaster is still absorbing. So I feel like I'm not going to end up adding my whole entire second scoop. To give you guys a closer look at what it should look like before you start to mix it with your hands. There we go. Okay, so yeah, it should be these like cracked islands. Camera can see. Nope. Okay. Yeah. Hope you guys can see that okay. So it should be like mostly islands. Awesome. And this is just like makes the best consistency for your plaster. If you end up adding more than you need, that's just going to make your plaster thicker and you're going to have to work with it a little quicker. If you don't add enough plaster, it makes your plaster kind of weak and really watery. So it'll be okay, especially because what we're making is like a hunk. It's like very thick. So a weaker plaster or thicker plaster is not really going to make too much of a difference. The thicker plaster you'll have a harder time getting it into your into all those grooves that we created and to flow into the details. That makes sense. Okay, I did accidentally get a little bit of plaster into my mold. That's okay. I'll try to tap it out. But it's going to get absorbed when I put the wet plaster in, so I'm not too worried. That happens to you. All right, we're ready to mix. Okay, this is the messy part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand in, and I'm going to start to do this. And then I'm going to go right to the bottom, and I'm going to just kind of squish the clumps out. And the total time that it should take you to do the mixing is probably no more than 10 seconds. So you can count it down if you want. The reason is, as soon as we start to agitate the plaster, it actually makes the process like go quicker. So it starts to set the plaster faster. So agitation will make your plaster sort of cure faster. So that's why we want to do as little as possible. Okay, so I'm just feeling right down to the bottom, mixing with my fingers and squishing the clumps out because we want a really smooth consistency. Should feel kind of like melted ice cream or like a yogurt kind of, okay? Awesome. So I'm going to take my dirty hand out, wipe it against the edge like that. And then I'm just going to, doesn't matter which hand you use, like everything's just going to kind of get dirty. So grab it with one hand, bring it over to your sculpture, and we're just going to choose one point to start pouring into. So we're not going to fill up the whole thing. I'm just going to add maybe like, I don't know, a couple tablespoons into one section. And now we get to smack the table. Here we go. Okay. The reason I'm smacking the table is to get the plaster to flow and to get into all the little cracks. And the other thing it does is it starts to bring all those air bubbles to the surface. Okay. So add a little more and smack it. Okay. Keep pouring in the same spot. There we go. Good. Little by little, we'll get it filled in. This is my favorite part too. Okay, so if you have poured it out and you still want to get some more plaster in your mold, take your dirty hand and just use it to scrape the edges and then add as much as you need. Try to get just a bit more because I made all those funky lines, funky outcroppings. Needs a little extra. Okay, so you might start to see air bubbles popping up to the surface. I don't see too many because I think I did a good job at mixing. But if don't worry, it's normal to see air bubbles. And that's kind of the limit of what I can do because it's starting to pour over the edge here. So that's as much plaster as I can fit in my mold. Doesn't have to go completely to the top. Just wherever it ends up being is good. Now you might be wondering what to do with your dirty cup. So what I recommend is that you just let it cure. Just leave it as is. Don't try to wash it at this point. You'll want to wash your hand, of course, but the tub, just let it dry, okay? And we're gonna do, I have my TV swap out so I can show you what we're gonna do once it dries. So I'll put it off in a safe spot, but I will wash my hand because I can't really touch anything else with it this dirty. And we're gonna end up disposing this water outdoors, preferably. Just gonna go back into the earth. Plaster comes from the earth. And you're gonna have such a small amount that it won't be a big deal. Okay. Cleaning up. Oh, no problem, Sophie. You can always watch us anytime. I appreciate you being here live with us. Okay, so how long is it gonna take for this plaster to set? Probably about an hour to 2 hours is generally how long it takes. It's a chemical process that's happening. So if you want to check on it from time to time, like every half an hour, what you can do is you can actually put your hand on top of it once it, like maybe after half an hour, right now it's very liquidy, you can actually feel the heat. So what's happening is the plaster is reacting with the water and it's going to heat up and then it's going to cool down. And that's how you know the process is complete. So generally after 2 hours, you're safe to undo your mold. Now I've actually did a sample last night. So here's my TV swap out. I'm going to just gently move this over out of our way. Okay. And I'm going to bring in the one I did yesterday. You'll notice I have some paper towel around it, and that's because if I was leaving the clay exposed overnight, I didn't want it to get completely dry. So if you're not going to be around to check on your mold for like, within 2 hours is probably okay. But if you're going to leave it for more than 2 hours, take some paper towel, either with a spray bottle or just dunking it in water. You can get it wet. And then you're just going to wrap the outside of the clay. And that's going to just help keep your clay from drying out too much. It's not necessary, but it is an extra step you can do. Okay, so here, ready for the reveal. I'm so excited you guys to see the one I made last night. Nice and hard. And this is like the best part. Okay, and you guys, I hope you're gonna like my design. I'm just gonna start removing the clay. Here we go. How cool does that look? Okay. And I'm curious to see if you guys know what tool I used to get this design. It's one of the ones on my table right now. Oh, how cool does that look? I love it. You can get like such cool textures and shapes. This is where the seam was. It's not too seamless, but that's gonna be the back of my candle holder. I'm gonna face that away from the viewing area. I'm gonna remove the lid. Okay. And then I will also remove the plug. So for this one, we're gonna have to do a little bit of digging. You can just go in there with your finger or a tool if you prefer. But you should be able to kind of dig it out in sections because it's squishy. Try it with my tool. There we go. It's coming. Awesome. Beauty. Yes, you guessed correct. It was a popsicle stick, Carissa. But you could try using the Sharpie too. That would definitely give you some consistent textures. So just look around, see what you have in your kit. Yes, it was a popsicle stick. Very good. So that's how I did it. I just pressed it in to the clay like this. Just repeated. So I was kind of thinking about like pine cones or like a dragon, like kind of like dragon scales. Like it could be whatever you want. I did end up flaring out the base too. So it's like kind of like a tree, but not quite. I don't know. I just thought it'd be fun to try. So there it is. Now, I know we're getting close to the end of our show, but I will stay on a little bit longer to show you guys the painting technique. And hopefully I can whip through that pretty quickly. Before you put your clay away, just check for extra bits of plaster that have ended up in your mold. This is going to happen. So just take your scraper, try to remove like the hard bits of plaster because those are going to end up staying in your clay and they won't end up like getting soft. They're just going to stay hard and crunchy. But you can totally reuse your clay for another day. Get all your bits back into a ball, smack it together, and before you put it in your bag, you want to add a bit of water to it. So I'll get this bit and add it back in. So you could kind of dunk it in your water tub like this. Get some moisture back in there. Or you can add the water directly to your bag as well. But just watch for leaks because sometimes these bags do get little holes in them. I like to store my clay in another container, like in another ice cream tub. So I just kind of store it in there for safekeeping. Excellent. Do a little bit of cleanup and show you guys how to do the painting next. So if Carissa does want to do our little draw for today, can get going on that. Okay. Now you can clean this too. You can go with like old toothbrush or just a sponge and clean off some of the clay residue, but it's probably not 100% necessary. I'm just gonna go for it and paint over top of the clay. I'm gonna be using 3 colors today. So this is sort of the similar technique if you watched our pumpkin hand dry brushing technique. So for making those posable pumpkin arms, we did a very similar technique where we use 3 colors and we start with the darkest first and we work our way up to the lightest. So I just want to show you that you don't always have to use like black and brown. You can use like any colors you want. And so I've chosen green. I'm going to start with the darkest green. Put some on my palette. Right, and then I'm just gonna like kind of do it really quickly to get into all of the grooves. Ooh, this looks good. You can do this part pretty fast. And this is where like a hair dryer might come in handy to dry things, which I might need to do because you don't want to do the next step with the paint wet. I'm going to be doing a dry brushing technique. Ooh. Of course, you want to paint the top as well. Oh, ooh, got our winner for today. Excellent. Who's it gonna be? I won't paint the whole thing for the demo. I'm gonna grab my hair dryer. Oop. Okay, I'm gonna mute the mic so you guys don't have to listen to my hair dryer. Okay, tried it a little bit just so I can fast track through these steps here. And move on to your second color next. And congratulations, Olivia, for winning our viewer prize. We'll get in touch with you and get you your prize pack for this week. Awesome. So, ready for the next color. So you can get it onto a new brush if you want. And just make sure it's dry and you're just kind of tamping out most of the paint. So we just want a very, very small amount of paint for this technique. And we're using our paintbrush sort of flat ways. So instead of like holding your paintbrush with the bristles pointing in, we want it almost like just laying like flat. So it's just gonna be hitting like the edges. This color's not showing up too well, so I'm just gonna go straight for my lighter color. We can get a little more contrast. Take a paper towel to like rub out the color in between colors. Don't really want to wash it completely because it makes the brush too wet. This is a dry brush technique. Okay, so you're just kind of, you're getting like very, very small amounts of paint on your brush. So I'm using the palette to kind of remove extra. And then I'm just gently rubbing the paintbrush along the edges. So just getting this little dry brush technique. I can see it in the studio, but it might be hard for you guys to see. Okay, you might be able to see that a little nicer. And really you're building it up. So it's just a gradual process. You can always go back and add more paint, but it's very difficult to take the paint away and you could paint it back to the base color. But it's really like a gentle brushing. Okay, and it's gonna start to create this really cool dry brush technique. Really kind of like elevates it, and it just gives it that like impressive like look. Gives it a little punch. So minimal amounts of paint on your brush is the thing to remember, and just like a gentle touch. You will get, of course, better the more you do this. And you might decide if the color is really not working for you, just go ahead and paint it back to your base. Start over. There's really nothing stopping you from doing that. This is kind of turning into more of a dragon scale looking thing for me. That's what I'm feeling. So I have an idea that maybe this could be the display for like a dragon egg to sit inside. I don't know. Or maybe, yeah, just like fun things happen. I didn't know what this was going to be, but now I'm feeling the dragon theme. I like it. It's cool. So I will continue working on this when our show wraps up. And I'll post a finished photo for you guys to see how it turned out. And please, please, please send me your finished pictures because I really, really want to see what you guys are doing. So you guys can, of course, tag us on social media if you do share. But we do have a special page on our website where you can just submit a photo. And that way we can see it that way. Or you could just send me an email as well. That works too. Okay. So I hope that was very instructional. I hope it, even if you've worked with the clay before, maybe it gives you a different way to work with your kit and make something that would be a lovely handmade gift. And yeah, maybe a Harry Potter dragon egg. Exactly. I love Harry Potter decorations, so that's kind of where my mind always goes. Again, thanks again, everyone, for being with us, for watching, crafting along, and please join us next week where we're going to be working on another craft. Thanks again and have a great weekend. Bye.